2 days of openEHR and FHIR conference in Amsterdam as well.
We did.
And this is the report out, so please.
Yes. So yes, thank you for being here. We did just meet for 2 days, and this is our first official report. So Rachel, why was it important that we met?
Why was it important that we met? We'll probably take this back to when we first had the dialogue.
Sure.
Yeah. So I remember meeting you 10th of July 2023 in Sydney. And I was going to meet you the day before, but there have been problems, so I met you on the 10th of July. And I said to you, why don't we collaborate? And you basically said, no chance. In fact, you said, I'm going to write a report on the defects of openEHR. I said, great, I want to read it because, you know, if we need to improve things, you need to know your weaknesses and strengths. And by the end of the conversation, you were like, okay, maybe we can collaborate. And I think the reason for that is I'd communicated that myself and, you know, the growing openEHR community were practitioners, and we equally vested in FHIR and openEHR, and we really appreciated everything you had done. So I think that conversation went from this isn't worth the time to maybe this is worth the time. But I'd like to ask your take on that original conversation.
Well, we had history, not personally, but organisationally, and I know how strong feelings are in parts of our community on both sides, and so it wasn't that I wasn't interested, it was that I didn't believe that it was achievable. But Rachel said, no, we should try. And so we tried. So what did we do to try?
I think we started a dialogue on building trust, because we had shared values. That was the first bit of the dialogue, I think. The shared values is, you very clearly in the FHIR community are about a community that is, you know, improving impact of data and transacting data in healthcare systems. You are, you know, you're there, you're passionate, you're connected to what you're doing. And for me, I think that was a shared value, right? It was shared value that our community, I think it's probably worth saying our relative communities going far back felt that one standard could fix everything, or one set of standards, one organisation, and we've become more ecumenical, as we say in English, broad church. Would you agree?
Sure, and you have, like we do, a passionate, excited community, which is great, and you have good things that we don't have. Well, we have good things you don't have. But, you know, we did have a shared history of monumental arguments about how things should be done. It
was like a grand game of intellectual top trumps. I think that'd be my summary of the past.
No, I think we should call it Game of Standard Thrones.
Yeah, Standard Thrones. I like that. But collaboration is kind of pervaded, and it is the way that people are now, and that's fantastic. So we started with sharing those values, building trust, and then I think we started getting curious about things together and just looking at what we might explore and sort of batting things about.
Yeah, and then we started moving to more people being involved in our collaboration, and it's the same model that openEHR has, that we have, that any community organisation has, which is iterating on trust and building trust and spreading the love, right?
Right. And as you put it a few days ago, good vibes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So making it something that is worth being part of.
Right. So then we organised the meeting that we just had, and we carefully curated the vibes around it and the people who were there and the expectations. And then we turned up, and I was still a little bit nervous because, you know, communities, they can go in unexpected directions, and I could all too easily imagine some unhappy, stony silences. But how did it go?
It went really well. I was kind of pinching myself. I was like, honestly, you know, I think we've done enough prep. So I think that was good. We managed expectations, we brought people into the room, but I was kind of like, I was like, seriously? This is going really well.
Right, so now we have a new problem.
Right.
Which is that we have to tell all of you that it went really, really well, but we don't want to set you with too high expectations.
So the press release will have lots of words about the future and what will happen over years, because we can't do this tomorrow. Even if we want, even if you had millions of pounds or dollars, you don't want to rush something like this, because communities are building trust, they're building governance, they're building those sorts of things. So if you do it too fast, everyone's rushing, and that doesn't happen. So you've got to do it at the right pace, I think.
Right. So we have lots of positive actions to share, to take together, and we have some teams to take each of those actions forwards. But first of all, they have to happen at volunteer speed.
Yeah.
And secondly, we collectively, both Rachel and I and the people in those teams, need to bring our wider communities along, because the meeting was not at all a full breadth of our communities, partly because just physically difficult to get everybody in the same room, and some things you just can't do with being in the same room and eating together and drinking together. But, our communities are worldwide, and that just costs an immense amount of money. So we didn't have everybody in the room, so we have to bring our communities along. But we should tell a little bit about what we're actually going to do together.
Absolutely. I'm going to start with the IPS.
You go.
Right, so we had a lot of Menti votes. We figured out what we needed to talk about. We had some discussions around 12 different areas, and then we settled on a number of projects in the 4 work groups. And actually, the piece that I was working on was the IPS, right? So we've got a lot of people that are, building the IPS in openEHR, and they want to translate it to FHIR or receive FHIR and then put it into openEHR. So it's a great use case, because we get to cut our teeth on so many of the other themes, things like, publishing documents together into the HL7 process, or, figuring out how we get tooling together, or how we're going to approach mapping and what the rules of the road are for mapping. So the IPS project is kind of the thematic that gives us the kind of proof that we can do these things and allows us to explore together. I don't know if you want to talk a bit more about the technical elements that are going to, be in the other...
Well, we said that we would collaborate to bring publishing together and to write some documents around reconciling, data issues that arise out of shared methodologies or trying to share information. And we said that we would make it possible to incorporate archetypes into HL7 publications, and we would work together to make it more easier, more generally done to map archetypes to FHIR resources. And in a way, all of those are 2 things. They're prep, that is preconditions for the success of the IPS stuff that you were talking about. And they're also steps along the path towards creating trust and, in the communities, and understanding that these are good things for all of us. So let's finish by talking about that. Why is this good for the openEHR community? And then I'll talk about why I think it's good for the FHIR community.
So I'll come back to me. I'm a recovering CIO. I probably do need therapy. Is Ian in the room? He offered me therapy earlier. Hi, Ian. Our community is full of practitioners. Wherever you find openEHR, you find FHIR. And you'll remember, back 2017, I did a big FHIR event in Salford. I did a big openEHR event as well. I think, Ian, you were at the openEHR event. And the point was, I as a CIO couldn't work out how to make these things work together efficiently. Our community is full of people like I used to be, and the benefit for us really is just driving more value, doing things more effectively, and making health systems able to transact data and store data more easily. So really it's really about having optimal infrastructure, as we call it in openEHR, within our health enterprises. What about you?
From my point of view, the first thing is a basic principle thing. The point of what we do is solving interoperability problems between people. So we better demonstrate that actually we can do that. I mean, that's the first fundamental point. And our mission is to help anybody exchange data. And so that's what we're doing. But more generally, we could always benefit from good ideas in other communities. And if we can't do that when we're interoperating, to bang on that point again, but also openEHR is really good at consulting with clinical users in a way that we're not. They have lots of content agreements, and content agreements are the single hardest thing for us to find. So let's reuse them as much as we can, and we will benefit from that. And then at a technical level, technical integration with publishing and tooling will make it that much easier for all of us to use all of the content that's available. And finally, it'll just make it that much easier for us to chart a forward vision for our stakeholders and our consumers who consume FHIR and openEHR and who try to build content. You know, from our point of view, openEHR is primarily a European thing, but the benefits won't primarily be European, they'll be for all of us. So I think time for questions from...
I think it is, yeah, absolutely. Questions?
So, maybe I start with a question to the room. We have these two people here who represent two communities. What would you like them to do to make your life easier? Anyone? Do you have a pressing need?
It's all good, Reem.
Huh?
It's all good.
It's all good. No, that can't be possible. Then you're done. Okay. Here. Dimati.
Yeah, I have a lot of question marks still. When you say the main advantage for FHIR is that we can better work the clinical use cases. I'm thinking, oh, well, we have IHE that we're working with now. What's the difference in the cooperation? How is the benefit higher, and how does that add up together? Because there's also a cooperation agreement between IHE and FHIR.
So a general arrangement between HL7 and IHE, or between standards groups and IHE, is that we develop the fundamental standards and IHE takes specific use cases and then, you know, profiles them and does the last mile testing. And so they can only do what we've made possible in the base standards. And actually the IHE agreements are generally very focused on workflow and business exchange. So actually we put the clinical content right before that. And so in general my answer is they need to do that too, but it's more pressing for us to do that since we're the platform on which they build.
Does that answer your question?
I think I still have a lot of... No, it's...
Okay.
Let the others go first.
Anyone? Maybe... Oh, Vadim, I'll have a question and then you. So, Grahame, you mentioned that it's primarily a European thing, but it could be valuable for other continents as well. First question, why is it primarily a European thing in your view? And also the same question for you, Rachel, and then I'll come to Vadim.
I'm just making an observation of what it is, not necessarily what it should be.
Yeah, cool.
But
for your interpretation.
But really, I think it's basically driven by commercial success of some European companies who took openEHR and ran with it and pushed it hard and created the relationships and did so in Europe, and so that's why it is a European thing. Not that it's, you know, methodologically suited to Europe more than anything else.
Yeah, so Europe's moving, isn't it? EHDS, all of the money that came in the stimulation package after COVID, digital health's moving faster than it is in other regions. Obviously working in Australia with Sparked, so, you know, it's happening there, but it's 120 countries that openEHR is being used in. And if you look at the US, for instance, it's not healthcare, it's life sciences and research it's being used in more. So for us, I think we both agree that Europe is probably the hot spot. But as Grahame said, it doesn't preclude any other country from using this or benefiting from this.
I have a question about the content agreements. What exactly are they and how do they work?
You think we're further ahead than we are.
I can talk about previous content agreements that we were going to base it on because I've been thinking about that. But yeah, I mean, we're going to be publishing joint IP under the HL7 process, and there will be content agreements. Yeah, I mean, that's something that was going into this we knew was going to happen.
There will be agreements.
Right, but you mentioned that openEHR already has existing content agreements that FHIR will benefit from, or that
So that is agreed, consensus-based archetypes which represent agreements around the content in the archetypes. They have lots of those. We should leverage those valuable. That, for me, the hardest thing is getting those kind of consensus.
Right, and those clinical models, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Lots of questions.
Let's explore some Germany's next. Yeah.
And maybe from my standpoint point of view is openEHR is make the data stable, and FHIR is exchangeable and make it possible that innovation took place on top of the data. So for me, if the integration between openEHR and FHIR will be work well, then the innovation can come on all levels. So if you ask me what should you do done, is all the use cases, all the implementation guides which are already on FHIR, in FHIR, well, let it work also on a stable data platform.
And which one would you choose first?
He sent me a list of 8 this morning.
Yeah.
Right.
Which one, that's decide the community. We cannot do everything.
You are part of the community,
Yeah.
so you can have your preferences.
Yeah, but we, of course, that's a whole the discussion on the 2 days.
Yeah, questionnaires was the next thing you'd really like us to tackle.
Yes, that would be very nice if questionnaires could be done, because the structure of the data, it goes everywhere. We don't have any governance about. But it's just one. For me, it's more about how do we get innovation working. While we want on the one side, we want everything open and quickly and standard, and FHIR is perfect for that. But on the other hand, we want data governance on a data level for secondary use, etc. So that combination must be fit and work together. So we need to work on that.
Is that something you want to?
Let's come back to Germany.
I hope I'm not boring anyone with the question right now, but am I right that if I boil it down, then FHIR would be the format for data exchange as it was supposed to be, and then openEHR would be the one for actually persisting the data? Is that a correct assumption?
Absolutely, but if you look at the IPS, they will still, be using the document format of the IPS as part of it. That's still part of the mix. So, but as a rough rule of thumb, yes.
Okay, then I have a question. As we see in the adoption in Germany for once, and I think that somewhere else the same is true, we see that FHIR is also being used as a persistence layer, although it's not supposed to be, or it's not forbidden, right? But what's the benefit of actually going with openEHR over FHIR? I mean, we're introducing another technology in that instance. Then we also have to consider OMOP for the secondary use.
Absolutely. Need OMOP too.
Exactly, and then that's the reason why we are kind of confused, because this introducing another technology means quite a lot of hurdles. If I go out there and talk to the vendors and tell them, hey, don't use FHIR, but rather openEHR. So what's the benefit of actually using openEHR? I guess it's the right term, not openEHR.
Either way is fine.
Right.
I'll give you a bit of my story and why. So I was ribbing Grahame on Sunday night because I implemented DB Motion with V3 and the RIM in it, and I had the whole city region running off this, and it was beautiful, and then the RIM kind of stopped being supported, which is when I got into OpenEHR. So I was CIO of the most digitally mature organisation in the NHS in the UK. I was doing risk stratification, I was doing AI, I had data science teams. I needed clean, codified, semantically harmonised data to do that, right? When you do that, and I was doing real-world evidence studies like the Salford Lung study, FHIR just doesn't have the data for the entire health record, the longitudinal record. It's just not going to fit the enterprise. I've used Smart CDR, and for smaller use cases, maybe. But once you're looking at big population and longitudinal records, you need it to be as neat and as efficient as possible in order to do those things. And that's why I moved to OpenEHR.
Is that a shortcoming of FHIR or a shortcoming of...
It was never designed... I don't think, I'm not speaking Grahame, I don't think it was ever designed to power the entire longitudinal record for 100 years of somebody's life.
Right. We didn't set out to design an application design framework. We set out to design an interoperability framework. We're not going to change our advice around people who use FHIR native servers and write applications that way, which is you can do that. But if you do that, we didn't design for that, and you're going to have to deal with the gaps that creates. And the other thing is, and a lot of them don't, is there's a whole bunch of knowledge within the openEHR framework about what it takes to make that work at scale. You probably should not ignore those lessons, but we're not going to say, well, openEHR for storage and everybody should be doing that. That's not how the world works. What we want to be saying is if you want to use openEHR for storage, we want that to work really well. As for OMOP, the world is converging towards OMOP, and I don't want to be critical of OMOP, but they've got a lot of work to do to get to the kind of sophistication we are as communities and as technologies and as being able to deal with the breadth of content that people need. OMOP is really good at what it does, but man, there's a big lift to come there, and I don't think they're ready for that yet as an organisation.
There's questions about OMOP. It's the 80-20, right? If you are university hospital doing regular research, it's probably going to do all your clinicians. But if you're going to start doing, some of the trials that we're doing on complex stage 4 cancers with, biologics and genomics in it, those people are tending to go to openEHR.
Would openEHR be a replacement for OMOP as well, or an alternative to OMOP as well?
So what we're seeing actually, because we've got Severin who's done some great work, is you can store it in openEHR and then extract OMOP, because that is to a degree a subset, yeah?
And so OMOP is, for all of us who have a huge amount of data and rich clinical systems with deep, contextualization and hierarchical data structures, which just arises naturally in any clinical system, whether you built it totally from scratch with a relational database, we're going to end up with the same data patterns because that's the world that we live in. All of us look at that data and try to do analytics on it and go, you can't do analytics on that data. You need to ETL that data to a square form for analytical purposes. And then you would, in principle, you could say, well, I'll do my extraction each time for each question. And there's kind of an optimization about that, because I can say, okay, then I'll QA my ETL to ensure I didn't introduce any bias for the question that I'm going to ask. And then each question is an entirely separate project with an ETL and then an analysis and a publication, and there's an inefficiency in that. So it would be really cool if we found a common form that we could ETL to that solved most questions. Well, that is OMOP. It is not what either of FHIR or openEHR are doing. And OMOP is saying, well, let's find the common forms so we can share our analytical queries. But there's some real challenges in there in terms of, did you introduce bias? Is it suitable for this particular question? It's optimised for pharma longitudinal studies. Once you get away from pharma longitudinal studies, you're on your own. And as I said, I have a big lift there to become, like even just to describe what it is that it's suitable for. So I'm not for all research. No, it's not. But that's the layout, of the relationship between the analytical, the operational systems and the analysis process.
Okay, thank you very much. Grahame, Rachel, much appreciated.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Let's move on to the next speakers.